Okie doke. Okie doke. Let's see if we are in fact live. One wonders. It says I am live. Let's see. Okay, we are live. Very good.
白岩学園3年 B 組の皆さん、こんにちは。
All right, good evening. So, today I went ahead and immediately before streaming, my cat was being cute and she was pretending to stalk and attack me, and she had an arched back and her tail was bottle brushed, her ears were back as well. And it was great. It was fun. So I'm sacrificing huge to be here right now. I could be right now pretending to be stalked by my cat, and instead I'm here. So appreciate it, guys. All right, moving on. So today I think we're going to go ahead and revisit. While I'm thinking about it, I'm going to get to Purim very quickly, I promise. I was just watching a television program. Yes, roll your eyes, laugh at me. I get it, because it's a Netflix original. My God. And it was okay. The first episode was directed by David Fincher, and I think he was in the production team as well. I don't know how involved he is after episode 1, but whoever they trained to do the cinematography, whether David Fincher is the director of future episodes or not, cinematography is fantastic. I mean, it's really excellent. It's called Mindhunter, and I'll freely admit that even though I think he's kind of he's like the Coldplay of directors, where he's technically good, but there's not much substance behind it. You know, like listen to a Coldplay album, and you know, they're well constructed tracks, and they're really good musicians, and the mixing is fantastic, and the lyrics are even once in a while pleasant or whatever, but you know, at the end of the day, it's still like, well, it's still Coldplay. And I kind of feel that way with David Fincher. He's had a couple of outstanding movies. Side note to that, I'm going to get a copy of Alien 3 in the near future so I can watch it again. But the thing is, it's Tom Anderson. Yeah, I've got a very peculiar nostalgic feel with regards to Coldplay now. It's kind of a mixed bag for me, keeping in mind that I am now basically an old man. And so now when I think of Coldplay, I think of my fucking lost youth. Anyway. Alright, so, but the show Mindhunter, it's 100% globo homo. It's the weirdest thing. The first episode or two, I'll admit, I was drawn in. I was like, wow, this, you know, they're going in directions. This is actually kind of cool. These are topics and concepts that I'm both familiar with and interested in, even though I ended that sentence in the phrase and the sentence both in a preposition, which is silly, but whatever. That's actually an oblique Beavis and Butthead joke, because Mindhunter is about FBI agents, and in the Beavis and Butthead Take America movie, there's an FBI agent that gets upset at a different FBI agent for ending a sentence in a preposition. Whatever. Anyway, it's stupid. It's a dumb joke. Moving on. The television show Mindhunter, they are keen. I was on the fence about watching. Radiohead's a guilty pleasure for me too, I'm not gonna lie. I try not to, but I can't help it. I feel I've got the same thing with who is it? MF Doom. I really like MF Doom's instrumental tracks. His Herbs and Spices albums are fantastic. Anyway, the Mindhunter television show is essentially a TV show designed, and I might be overstepping or overthinking. I really don't know, but I would swear that they are actually naming the incel on an abstract level, on a subconscious level, because they're, you know, and I'm in episode, I think, 4 now, I think. Yeah, so there are, you know, because it's only episode 4 that I'm talking about, you know, it's not that big of a deal about, National Anthem is a great track, by the way. Radiohead's National Anthem, fucking love that track. Do 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 do. Love that. Anyway, it's great. But yeah, I think they're naming the incel, and I think that's really interesting, because what they're doing is they are equating murderers with incels. Now, I don't know how, and my God, there are so many things going on with it. Like, there are problems with boundaries. They're always talking about pushing boundaries. They're talking about breaking barriers or whatever. And that's obviously a super duper gemish thing on a cultural level, which isn't to say that there aren't certain barriers that ought to be broken, or there aren't certain rules that should be not observed within certain contexts. It's just that, you know, there are all these issues with it, because it's like, well, you know, spirit of the law, not the letter of the law, blah, blah, blah. But of course, the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law, you know, that's a New Testament vibe. But the Old Testament, they're always about following the letter of the law as crisply as possible, except when it comes to Edom, in which case the moment they're talking about Edom, then they're all about law destruction. They're all about barrier destruction. So it's kind of weird. And I'm watching that play out in this TV show, Mindhunter, and I'm gonna keep watching it to see what pops up. But yeah, there's like this really creepy fucking bit where, like, and again, I'm not spoiling anything because it's like episode fucking 3 or something. Like, no one cares. No one here is gonna watch it, so it doesn't really matter if I spoil it. But like, there are scenes where it's basically it's good cop, bad cop in a way. It's a buddy cop show where you have something not dissimilar to Mulder's Scully in a way, where you've got sort of the wide-eyed Mulder and then the slightly skeptical, well, she is actually very skeptical Scully, but in this case, in Mindhunter, you've got the young buck who has an idea about how to deal with criminals or whatever, and he's paired up with sort of an older, by-the-book guy who's a lot more pragmatic and methodical. And truth be told, it's actually kind of an interesting dynamic. I actually do like it. But these two guys, they go for the first like 2 episodes through an entire gamut where they're talking to a serial murderer, and this guy, like, you know, cover your ears if you're sensitive, but, you know, within the fiction of this television show, the guy like rapes and murders a bunch of women, and then and his grandparents, and he beats to death his mother with a claw hammer, then severs her head, and then he like fucks her hole, like her neck hole or something like that. Like, really, really out of control stuff is going on. After they use that information, like, there's this big thing about, like, this guy might be able to help with a case that they're doing now or something, you know, Ode to Silence of the Lambs. After they have figured out, you know, who, you know, there's like a current killer or something that they're going after, and this other guy, like, you know, his insights might help out the current killer. Again, Silence of the Lambs. So after they catch the current killer, they have a little celebratory scene in which, you know, they toast or something like that, which, by the way, was a really weird scene, because I realized as I was watching that scene that the only 2 characters in that scene, like, the only 2 real characters in that scene were the good cop, bad cop, the buddy cops, and there was like one other tertiary that was there for like a couple of scenes for like 2 episodes or something, but he was basically on and off camera and not really a character at all. He was literally a placeholder. Anyway, after they had their big celebratory thing, the wide-eyed soft boy cop, the good cop, the true believer, he's like at his residence with his girlfriend, and then they start, like, he gets kind of randy and he starts to make moves about them having sex, and then they start, like, they have this really weird conversation where suddenly they're like, well, I'm going to threaten to murder you. Oh, I'm going to threaten to murder you. And I was like, that's fucking creepy. That's not, like, that would throw me out of the mood entirely. It would have to be like, no, this needs to stop. This is not cool. This is not sexy. This is the opposite. And I'm going to go outside for a walk. You know, if you want to come with me, that's fine. But this is a bit much. And, like, but that's the whole show. The show is all about these kinds of really weird, where can we push boundaries or whatever. And again, this is important to remember. The FBI agents are being presented as cool. The government is being presented as cool. That's very important to remember. Authority is cool. Okay? And note that it's the federal government, not local police. It's the feds, federal government. Okay? Feds are cool. Remember that. And this Fed, like, he's this particular the doe-eyed cop. I forget his name. He smokes pot, and like in the first episode he smokes pot and he goes to like a rock and roll concert with his GF or something, and they have sex like the next night or something, and they're not married. So straight ahead normal, like what you would expect from a normal lefty, but in this case it's a federal agent. And so you've got the feds being presented as cool, and the killers, what are the killers? They are basically basement dwellers. And in fact, the guy that they interview, the sub-in for Ed Gein or Hannibal Lecter, his name is Edmund in the TV show Mindhunter. Edmund actually makes reference to being forced to sleep in a basement by his mother. So, and he also makes reference to after he killed his grandmother, he was in a mental institution for like 6 years or something till age 21, which made it impossible for him to communicate with women and have normal relationships, like boyfriend-girlfriend relationships moving into marriage. He wasn't able to do that. So, what was he? A murderous, basement-dwelling incel. And that's actually like that was a major theme within the television show, because the real, and again I'm spoiling it, like, ooh, wow, 4 episodes in, there are 2 seasons, so again I'm not spoiling much, but the real life killer that they were trying to find, he was also, it's called Mindhunter. It's on Netflix. There are 2 seasons. It was initially directed, the first episode is directed by David Fincher, I believe. He's attached to the property, and the style is 100% David Fincher. Anyhow, the real-life killer in the TV show, Mindhunter, he was also an incel. His relationship was ruined by his mother. Both of them lived with their mothers. Both of them were basically failures at life or something like that. So basically what I think they're trying to do in a backhanded way, it sounds weird, but I think what they're trying to do, it strikes me as predictive programming. It reminds me of it reminds me of the Book of Esther, of all the things. Speaking of which, I'm going to get back to the book in just a moment. But within the Book of Esther, which is the basis of Purim, within the Book of Esther, the character of Haman is supposed to be the arch enemy of Mordecai. And there's a section within the Book of Esther where Haman goes home and he boasts about his wealth and his power to his servants and to his wife. That is the most pathetic fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. That does not strike me as villainous. That just strikes me as kind of lame, kind of douchey and silly and like whatever. And the way that this television show is going after men who are maligned by women, by their mothers, it just gives me the impression that this is kind of like on a meta level. It's like they're doing that same thing, like they're vilifying Haman, but in this case it's incels. Oh, and another thing, there is a bit where they got to rail on racist cops. They said that this is in the TV show, I'm not making this up, they said that blacks and Mexicans would be too respectful of old women to be the culprit, so it has to be white trash. Again, these are the lines in the TV show. And there's a big giant stink about women. The TV show is obsessed with women and men's relationships with women. And I think that this is going to end up going just because they're kind of there is still the thread of interesting ideas, and it hasn't gone full-blown propaganda, but I expect it to go propaganda. So I think I'm going to keep watching the TV show for a little while, until I lose all interest. At the moment, I just expect it to become just normal, communist propaganda, but there might be one or two ideas. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's interesting, and I kind of I got like, yeah, there are a couple of threads there. There are a couple of threads, so I'm going to keep watching it, and we'll see what happens. Yes, Esther is in the Tanakh. I don't know if it's in the Torah, because the Torah is the first 10 books. But anyhow, all right. So we are now all the way down to minute 21. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a little sip of water, and then I'm gonna get right into Purim when I come back. I'm gonna take a break. This first track is Poppy Seed by Boards of Canada. right, that was Poppy Seed by Boards of Canada. Great big fan. And alright, so now we're going to get right back into a book discussing Purim, because that is what we do. Alright. Where are we? There we are. Now then, previously on Ekulux live streams, so we were talking a little bit about how there is some kind of weird historicity behind Purim, and how there are issues with it, interpretations regarding how Mordecai and Esther were in fact sub-ins for other gods, and something else. I think I'm going to go ahead and just start with the paragraph, like on the topmost paragraph of the 2 pages on the left-hand side, so that I just keep going down. So I might actually be rereading a paragraph, but I'm just gonna do it anyway. Just go with it. Excuse me. All right. So here we are. This is a book called Purim, or The Feast of Esther, circa 1933. Here we go. When the crisis came, Mordecai refused to bow before Haman because this wicked man was an astrologer and, among other things, he had an image of a false god ostentatiously embroidered on his garment. That's a really weird series of things to get upset about. If I recall correctly, Haman was accused of being an Amalekite, and being an Amalekite is much more important, one would think, than whether or not he was an astrologer and had the image of a false god ostentatiously embroidered on his garment. It's kind of weird. Anyhow, well, yeah, but I wonder if the 10 Commandments existed during the Book of Esther. I'll have to look into that. Continuing, Mordecai, when he heard of the calamity that had fallen on Israel, made his way to Esther, his clothes rent with sackcloth and ashes on his head. What a freaking drama queen. I mean, legit, if there's like something important going on, I mean, because was it Jesse Smollett, right? He showed up with into a police department with like a noose around his neck, and it's like, that's theatrics, buddy. That's not real. That's stupid. You know, if something important is going on, don't fucking put on a mask and a costume and be like, look, this is me being a victim. No, you do something about it. I don't like that. Anyway, and there's also this other thing where in the Book of Esther, Mordecai, he's basically bitching and moaning with sackcloth and ashes and all this good stuff. Esther says, take that retarded garb off, dress yourself, and let's talk about this. And he's like, no, I'm gonna stay in the street and I'm gonna cry with these ashes on my face. And it's like, dude, shut the fuck up. It's stupid. Anyway, continuing. When she saw Mordecai in the courtyard, Esther, in her fright, gave birth to a stillborn child. Okay, I don't remember that. I don't remember that in the story at all. Instead of going herself, and to avoid gossip, she sent her maid Hatash to find out what was the trouble. Wait, what? Wait, so she gives birth to a stillborn child and then is like, okay, well, now that that's over, I guess I'm going to find out what Mordecai's all about? No, I call bullshit. This is just a bunch of stupid embellishment that makes no sense. Continuing. Mordecai told Hatash of his dream. I don't remember that, but whatever, let's continue. He saw Esther as a little rivulet of water separating 2 fighting streams. The rivulet grows larger and larger till it floods the earth. Esther knew of this dream which Mordecai had dreamt before. He asks her to pray for her people and to intercede with the king on their behalf. Wait, Esther's gonna be a flood? You fucking out of your mind? Okay, whatever. Anyway, continuing. Though the festival of Passover was at hand, and the, quote, scroll of fasting, end quote, parenthetical Migalat ta'anit, end parenthetical, forbade a fast in the month of Nisan, Esther was able to overcome her cousin's scruples. Mordecai was her cousin. Her cousin's scruples by adroit question and still more apt counter question, and a fast was proclaimed for all gems. Meanwhile, in heaven, Satan had explained before the Lord Almighty the folly and the sinfulness of his people Israel. Quote, let Israel be destroyed, end quote, said God. Quote, bring me a roll that I may record the decree of destruction, end quote. Powerful. As these words of ominous portent resounded throughout the seventh vault of heaven, there appeared before the throne of God a woman clad in a widow's garments, who cast herself down and wept in such great anguish that the ministering angels wept in sympathy. This is exactly what Mordecai did with his sackcloth and ashes. This is exactly what Jesse Smollett did, and this is exactly what you hear about from the ADL at all times. It's always going down and weeping for some reason. All right, continuing. Quote, quote, Lord of the universe, end quote, she cried, who was none other than the Torah, parenthetical, law, end parenthetical, which God had given to Moses on Mount Sinai. Quote, if there are no gems, what need of me? What need of commandments in this world? End quote. When the sun and the moon heard the decree, they eclipsed their light and hid themselves in a mantle of darkness. Gloom, deep darkness, were on the face of the heavens and on the face of the earth. Then Elijah the prophet arose and cried out to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, quote, how long will ye slumber? How long will ye not give ear to the cry of your children? Look! The angels that minister before the Holy One, parenthetical, blessed be he, end parenthetical, the sun, the moon, the firmament, yea, the very earth itself are moved and tremble before this doom which threatens Israel. What can we do for our children? End quote. Gosh, that's a hell of a thing. And then Elijah runs to Moses and says to him, quote, O faithful shepherd, can you not help your people in their hour of need? End quote. Moses asks him, quote, is there even one good man in this generation? End quote. Quote, yes, end quote, answers Elijah, quote, his name is Mordecai, end quote. Quote, go then to him, end quote, says Moses, quote, and let him assemble his brethren, and let them repent of their sin and pray for pardon, end quote. Alas, said Elijah, quote, the decree is already gone forth, it is written and it is sealed, end quote. Then Moses asked, is it sealed with blood, or is it sealed with clay? If it is sealed with blood, then nothing can avail against it. But if it is sealed with clay, then it may be averted. Quote, with clay, replied Elijah. Quote, then go and tell Mordecai, end quote. So here's a moving of goalposts. So apparently they get to reinterpret things according to new whatevers. It reminds me of little kids making things up as they go along. All right, moving on.
When Elijah told Mordecai that the decree had gone forth, he wept and tore his garments, and, as has already been related, went to tell his sad tidings to Esther. Mordecai returned from his woeful mission, prostrating himself, crying, and I'm sure weeping, rubbing his hands together. Mordecai returned from his woeful mission and announced a day of prayer and of fasting, and obliged even the little children to abstain from food, so that they wept with loud voices. Their mothers joined in their weeping, and their crying and clamor reached even up to heaven. That seems kind of cruel, though, doesn't it? Getting little kids to fast, commanding them so that they would cry harder. Like, it's kind of fucked up. Moving on. There, about the second watch of the night, the Holy One, blessed be He, arose from his throne of justice and sat down on the mercy seat and said, quote, "What cry is this that reaches me? I hear a noise as of lambs bleating and young goats crying out." End quote. Then Moses arose before the Holy One, blessed be He, and spoke, saying, quote, "Lord of the universe, this is neither the bleating of lambs nor the crying of young goats. It is the cry of thine own people, the children of Israel. For 3 days and for 3 nights have they fasted, and have they prayed. Tomorrow their enemy will slaughter them, even as sheep and goats." End quote. Then the Holy One, blessed be He, took up the clay seal, record of destruction, and in his wrath brake it into pieces, and cast them upon the earth. They fell on the king Ahasuerus, and fright and sleeplessness came over him, for do we not read, quote, "And the sleep of the king was disturbed," end quote. So basically, the king woke up, and the story behind that is that all of heaven made him wake up. Okay, continuing. Meanwhile, Esther, sorely grieved at the fate of her people, and I actually agree, by the way, with the whole idea of Esther taking on the plight of her people. Like, that's actually a good thing. That's like it's the only character element of Esther. Like, if you look at it from just a writing standpoint, Esther's character can basically be summed up as she was cute like Winona Ryder, and she helped her people, and that was it. She said, "Please don't do that," and then the king was like, "Okay, totes, because you're hot," and that's it. And that's not a character. That's just like a person being cute and saying, "Please don't," and then someone saying, "Okay." Moving on. Meanwhile, Esther, sorely grieved at the fate of her people, she put off her jewels and rich raiment, loosened her hair, and fell to fasting and praying that she might be successful in her dangerous errand. On the 3rd day she attired herself in the finest garments, and, imbued with the Holy Spirit, passed with a serene countenance into the inner court. As court etiquette demanded, 2 maids accompanied her, on one of whom she leaned, while the other carried her train. On her way she passed the idols, and feeling the Holy Spirit depart from her, cried out, quote, my Lord, why hast thou forsaken me?" End quote. Then she repented of her former hastiness in calling her enemy a dog, and now named him a lion, and was able to continue to the king's presence, supported by 3 angels. Ahasuerus. So basically, this is all drama queen stuff. You can actually just imagine the movie Mean Girls or something, and just imagine the queen Mean Girl basically being taken in by her angels or some such, and then being, putting her hand to her forehead and pretending to faint or something. That's basically what that was. Moving on. Ahasuerus tried to avoid her glance when she came before him, but an angel turned his head round forcibly toward her. When Esther saw his burning eyes and flushed face, she fainted. Oh, there it is. Her doom was virtually pronounced. Then the Holy One, blessed be he, so increased her beauty that Ahasuerus could only look at her. As he gazed, admiration grew more and more intense. An angel lengthened his scepter so that Esther touched it. So basically, Esther fainted, and then someone made her look even more hot. So not just any old Winona Ryder, but like 22-year-old Winona Ryder. Awesome. Continuing. Her visit now had the king's approval, and she invited him, together with Haman, to her banquet. Ahasuerus himself is much discussed. He is identified with Ahasuerus mentioned in Daniel 9:1 as the father of Darius of Media, and referred to in Ezra 4:6. He is one of the 3 monarchs who ruled over the entire world, the other 2 being Ahab and Nebuchadnezzar. The Targum Shennai adds the 4th in Solomon. I don't know what that means. Rabbi Gamaliel II tells us that Ahasuerus was whimsical and vacillating, while Rab and Samuel point out his inefficiency as a ruler. He is regarded as having been evil from the time he came to the throne because he stopped work on the Second Temple merely on account of a slanderous Samaritan report which had reached him. I'll be darned. How terrible. Of him. Now that's the thing. It's like he's a villain for not finishing a temple from a foreign tribe. I mean, come on. Why should he be a villain just because he didn't want to do something that some foreigners wanted him to do? Like, it's his empire. It's not their empire. Whatever, moving on. Of him, Abba Gorion relates that he sacrificed his friend to his wife, and his wife to his friend. But the reference has been viewed as an overt criticism of the emperor Domitian, capital D, Domitian? Oh, Domitian. My bad. Domitian. It was a criticism of the Emperor Domitian, of whom this was true. By nature, he was a miser who amassed great treasure, which it was the purpose of the Holy One, blessed be he, that of Cyrus his successor should give to Israel to stop them in building to help them in building of the Second Temple. I see. So actually, the king's treasure wasn't supposed to be his. The treasure of Persia was not to be for Persians. The treasure of Persia was supposed to be for Israel. So, remember that, guys. This isn't your treasure. This is their treasure. Everything that you make is not yours. It's theirs. Let's move on. Instead of being woken on the fateful night by God, casting on him the pieces of his clay-sealed record, another account has it that it was the Archangel Michael, or Gabriel, who cast Ahasuerus down on the ground 366 times. Then he... Alright, that's... 366 sounds like a mention of years, so I think what they're saying is, I think that I don't know for a fact, but I'm guessing at the moment, they are saying that Ahasuerus was linked to the solar calendar as opposed to the lunar calendar, keeping in mind that Jews' gems are much more into the lunar calendar, and they regard the solar calendar as being that of Edom. So there's some violence against a person who believes in the solar calendar here. Let's move on. He then brought before the irate king the company of bakers, butlers, and cooks who had prepared the banquet. As soon as the king saw them, he cried out, quote, "You have poisoned me," end quote. Quote, "See them end quote. They replied, quote, if Esther and Haman, who ate and drank with you, are poisoned, end quote. Then Ahasuerus found that they were well. He sent for the book of the Chronicles of the Medes and Persians to help him pass the sleepless night. Thus it came about that he learned of Mordecai's unrewarded acts. Much earlier on, Mordecai caught some kind of a plot of assassination against Ahasuerus, the king, husband of Esther. And so, like, the king just forgot. Like, he was about to get killed. Someone helped him out, and he was like, I guess I'm going to forget about that, and I'm never going to think about it again. And he had to read a book. So he actually talked with Mordecai between the assassination attempt and this instance of him reading the book. And, like, it just never occurred to him. At no point was he like, hey, by the way, thanks, buddy. That was super awesome. Just... I think this is shit writing. I think this is terrible writing, you know? So, like, when I read the Book of Esther, I don't read it as something that I would want to emulate as a writing project. I look at it as something that I would say, it's what not to do. It's exactly what not to write. It's how to not write. If you want an example of a shit story that you should not emulate, the Book of Esther is a great one. Continuing. Ahasuerus was the wealthiest king ever known on this earth. He set up couches of gold and silver in the main streets of his capital, that he might parade his wealth before the eyes of the world. His dishes and his vessels were all of gold, and the pavement of his palace inset with precious stones and pearls. In the magnificence of his throne he tried to vie with Solomon. Then did the wicked Haman plot against Israel. Sakes, child. The rabbis love to cast ridicule upon him, to dwell upon his folly and his villainy. The Persian gems of the early Middle Ages used to have a peculiar tradition concerning his rise to fortune. It is the Al-Biruni, in his Chronology of the Ancient Nations, who has preserved this legend for us. Quote, once, end quote, it would appear, quote, a man called Haman, a person of no importance, traveled to Justar in order to undertake some office. Reaching this town in time, and fell into utter distress. So he took the seat near the temples and demanded for every dead body that was to be buried there 3.5 dirhams. My gosh. So he just did this somehow with no support and no one objecting. Okay, moving on. And a newcomer as well, because he just showed up. All right, whatever. I don't buy it, but whatever. This went on till the daughter of King Ahasuerus died. The bearers of her body refused to pay Haman, but he remained obdurate until they had to pay what he asked. Even then he was not content, and asked for more and more money till it reached an enormous sum. The king was informed of this and ordered the bearers to pay Haman. Then he summoned this man to his presence and said, who invested you with such an office? End quote. That's a reasonable question. I guess we're going to find out. Here we go. Haman replied, quote, and who forbade me to do this? End quote. Well, so basically, if you simply declare that you are going to do a thing, it is beyond question and beyond reproach. I'm going to remember that. Who forbade me to do this? Now, I'm going to keep this in mind. I can't. Okay, what? You know what? I'm going to write that down. I'm going to take a break. We are at page 215. I'm going to take a break because I have to write that one sentence down. Who forbade me from doing this? That's actually an important sentence, and I'm going to write that down. And while I do that, I'm going to play some Boards of Canada. The first one was Poppy Seed, and this is going to be Poppy Seed Reprised by Boards of Canada. Okie dokie. That was Poppy Seed reprised by Boards of Canada. And yeah, there we go. I just freaking love that track. It's a simple, pleasant track. Anyhow, so we are now at minute 56, so I think I'm going to get ready to call stream. Oh my gosh, the track is still going on. This one of the weird things about Boards of Canada. Like, I can see the audio. I'm not sure if anyone can even hear it, but they have this thing about like sounds that just continue. Weirdly, I love it. Anyhow, so we're gonna go back to the main now. And there we go. Let me check chat for just a moment. Okay, yeah, there's like an entire other set of things going on here. All right, fair enough. Well, for the moment, well, geez, actually, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and, just for a moment, I'm going to go ahead and give Jonathan Pohl a link, because I got to get to bed as soon as possible, but I can go ahead and chit-chat for a minute. Excuse me. Alright, so where are we? We've got Hangouts, bada boom, and vid call. It's a big checkaroo. Here I am boomer teching live like an idiot, but that's fine. And shaka. It's not really pocket sand, it's just shisha. It's a link. So there you go. If Jonathan Pohl wants to pop by, he is more than welcome to do so. At any rate, all right. So then, yeah, the he has to be quiet. All right. Well, if you can't join, then that's entirely too bad. There's the thing about that whole concept of who forbade me from doing this. That's actually an important concept. There is this idea on an esoteric level. I don't know the words, I don't know the verbiage for it, but I learned this from my my little brochure search into the Illuminati. And the concept was that if you announce that you're going to do a particular thing and no one objects, you have full authority to do that thing. I mean, this is basically schoolyard rules when you stop and think about it. So when he says, "And who forbade me from doing this?" he's basically saying, if I declare it, so it must be. And this is why we have all those movies about like zombies, or movies about civil unrest, or movies about, what is it, the killing of Trump supporters and whatnot. These movies, they indicate, now whether they come true or not is a separate issue. It's not about whether they come true. It's just that on an abstract, esoteric, subliminal, subconscious level, these movies are outlining, and television shows, they are outlining the program that we are to be following. And it's in this sense that I think about the phrase, "and who forbade me from doing this." Again, if you just announce your intent and there is no pushback, then you are free to do that intent. Look at the BBC. What are they doing? They're actually blackwashing British history. They are inserting black people everywhere. The Nutcracker. I've got nothing against Morgan Freeman. I've got nothing against black people. I don't really care. Whatever they want to do, fine. But when it's a concerted effort to inject them into absolutely everything that is European in nature, it's like, this is obviously fake and gay. This is stupid. Why are you doing this? I think it's a part of their program. They're planning for demographic replacement, so obviously they have to start injecting the new population into European art forms and European narratives. It simply has to be the case. So, that phrase, boy, that... Excuse me, sorry about that. Yeah, that phrase really has me going right now, I gotta say. I'm gonna have to ponder that, because that's a hell of a thing. That is a hell of a thing. So, anyhow, yes, Jonathan Pohl says that is why we need to start forbidding them from doing stuff. Yes. In fact, my first thought moved immediately to our God-given right to self-defense, which of course includes the right to keep and bear arms. As far as I'm concerned, anyone that would demand that I be defenseless against tyranny, that person has identified themselves as an enemy. That's not to say that I wish to view them as an enemy. That is to say that they are behaving as a person who has defined me as their enemy. So in this regard, it's like, well, am I going to treat a viper like a friend? No, I am not going to treat a viper like a friend. A person that runs up to me and hugs me, I am going to treat, well, the person could be crazy, so I might not treat them very well. It depends on the context of their fucking nut bar, maybe. Maybe I'd want to back off a little bit, who knows. But yeah, a person that presents, say, a bouquet of roses, okay, yeah, sure, fine. I'll tend to be nice. I'm not really into roses, but whatever. The point stands, if they're offering you a gift of some sort and they're being pleasant to you, you will treat them with some manner of pleasantness. Basically, you will be more than merely civil, I'm sure. As for a person that runs up to you and says, "I'm going to attack you and I demand that you be defenseless against my attacks," that's a very different person. That's a very different attitude that they're approaching you with which they are approaching you. And so it's in this sense that I say that they have identified themselves as an enemy, inasmuch as if they are going to identify me as either an enemy or as to be subject under their rule, then necessarily I must respond to that person as either being hostile in the physical sense or as a tyrant, one or the other. So it's in this regard that I say, anyone that would demand that I be defenseless against any kind of villainy, whether tyrannical or just a normal criminal, that person has identified themselves as an enemy. Period. The end. So, yes, up here, Jonathan Pohl says that is why we need to start forbidding them from doing stuff. Yes. One of the chief things is they need to stop ethnically cleansing us. They need to stop forbidding us from talking. They need to stop forbidding us from defending ourselves against the evil designs and programs. And of course, I'm only speaking about vampires, just so we're all on the same page. We're now talking about my favorite movie, The Lost Boys, 1987's The Lost Boys. Fabulous movie, by the way. I don't think that we should be listening to the demands of vampires at all. In personal opinion, I think it's a good idea to start forbidding them from doing certain things, because vampires are bad. I don't like them. Anyhow, we are now at the 12:04 minute, and Goose Whisperer. It's not a bad movie. I haven't seen it in years, so I'm watching it with rose-tinted glasses, and I know that. Which, by the way, is a reference to the movie, because the main character, Michael, he actually wears sunglasses at one point. Specifically because anyway, it's a big thing. It's the 80s. It made sense at the time. Anyhow, it's not a bad movie. It's not great, but I haven't seen it in a long time, so I'm sure that there's a lot of nostalgia coloring my view of it. At any rate, one of the things that strikes me about it is that the two Coreys were in the movie, and this would have been during the heyday, and I do think that they were very likely abused during those days. And Joel Schumacher, I'm pretty sure it was Schumacher, was the guy who directed that. It was either Schumacher or the other guy whose name I can't remember. And if it was Schumacher, which I think it was, that was the guy that made bat nipples and the bat butt. So we're already talking about a guy that is of a certain ilk. And I think that there were things that were on an abstract level discussed in that movie. Of the vampires, it's worth noting that one of the vampires is a little kid. So there's things going on there. There are absolutely things going on within that movie. There are things being discussed within that movie. At any rate, I am going to, I think, call stream, because I was happy to speak with Jonathan Pohl, but if Jonathan Pohl is unable to speak, too bad, then I think I'm just going to go ahead and call stream, really. I'm going to play an album, though, before I end the stream. So I'm going to boomer tech for just a minute here and find an album, something small-ish. Let's see what we can find. It's tempting. It's always tempting to go with haircuts for men, but I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah, I'm going to play some 96 Pontiac Grand Prix. Which, by the way, was a car. No one remembers that, but there was a car made by Pontiac called the Grand Prix, which I don't think was very impressive. Whatever, anyway. You can Google it and find out why. At any rate, I think I'm going to go ahead and let out now. So, since there is only the slightest hint of K-streaming, that qualifies. That's enough. I think that anyone who is interested in exercising their God-given right to keep and bear arms, I think that such people should have the 4 rules of firearm safety firmly in their mind when they handle such weapons. Seriously, I'm always very serious. I mean, I say it like it's tongue-in-cheek, but I'm not joking. It is actually very serious. These are tools. These are tools of defense, and these tools are capable of putting holes where there were no holes, so it's important to treat them with the respect that they deserve. The 4 rules being: rule number 1, always treat every firearm like it is loaded. Rule number 2, never cover or sweep anything that you are not willing to destroy. Rule number 3, your finger stays off of the trigger until your sights are on target. And the 4th and final rule is be aware of your target and what's beyond it. And with that, I am going to let out, I don't think I'm going to play the outro track today. I think I'm just going to go album and brush my teeth, and I'm going to floss just as everyone in chat should do. And there you go. That's it. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone, for popping by. I wish I'd checked the chat a little bit more, but I didn't. So maybe I'll do a little bit more of that. And then tomorrow I'm going to go back to more discussions on Purim. So there we are. All right, guys. Cheers.